Okay, well, good morning. I think I will start. It's wonderful to be here and share these ideas with you today. And I'm pleased to see so many of you taking the time to listen in. If you have any questions, I won't be able to present and respond to chats, but please do send me a question and I will try and do that at the Q&A session. Towards the end of the session, I will pause, read through any questions you've asked, and answer those as best I can. So hopefully you can all hear me and you can see my slides. Just got to make sure of these things. So I've got this theme today, which is about self-management in challenging times. And it doesn't really matter where in the world you are. We all seem to be having a very, let's say, a different experience this year than any of us would have managed. You may be working from home. You may be working in a different way than you used to. You may not be working at all in some cases. In this country, we have furloughed many staff, which meant we've just suspended them until businesses go back to normal. So let's look at some principles that I believe will be invaluable to you and useful, not just now, but when we come back to normal and we begin to work more like we used to. So these are the main topics I'm going to go through in the next 55 minutes or so. Something which is known as OKR, goal setting, routine, habits, and structure, how to control your attention, positive leisure time, self-care, and managing your work environment. Not the environment, just the area you work with. Now, OKR is taken from a book by John Doerr. I'll show you the cover in a moment. It's called Measure What Matters. And he was an executive with Google. And he learned this technique from working with someone called Andy Grove. And Andy Grove was the manager for many years with Intel. And when he was working at Intel, he made Intel one of the most successful companies in the world. His principles revolve around this OKR: objective, key results, and a new one that he added later, which is called initiatives. Let me explain. So an objective is what you want to achieve, a key result is what you measure, an initiative is something that moves you towards both. Now, goals are often set as the essential elements of leadership and management. They align the whole organization. They ensure accountability. They make sure everybody can see everyone else's results, and they give you insights into what's working and not working. Now, John Doerr took this to another level, and he said the ability of a company or a team or a person to focus, align, to be accountable, and to stretch is down to this objective key results. And this is the book I mentioned. Definitely worth looking at if you've not seen this. What to avoid? Don't have too many goals. Don't use your OKR as a to-do list. Make sure that you are linking your OKRs with those of your organizations. And don't demand perfection. It's about direction and motivation. So let's look at the basics that are really important. In this example, I'm going to look at a sales example. So an objective, what you're trying to accomplish, and a key result is what you measure that helps you to lead towards your objective. So in this example, the account executive was going to create a lasting sales engine. The key results are lead conversion and closing a particular number of sales. You'll notice here that the objective doesn't necessarily have to have a number. The number is in the key results. The objective gives motivation and direction, and the key result gives a trackable performance index. This is important to notice. So, as I mentioned, action, time-bounded, and ambitious are good things for an objective. A key result has to be measurable. Only have around 3 objectives, what John Doerr calls just choose 3 things. So when you start your day, most mornings, just choose 3 things that you would like to achieve that day. And if you achieve them, then move on to something else. But this ability to focus is really important. Here are some more examples, and you'll see these on the slide here. Each one of the objectives in itself is motivational, but the key result is important to make sure. In the time of a challenge, whether it's a recession or whether it's a coronavirus or whether it's a company going through a large transition or a difficult time in your personal life, what we all need is vision. We need to see where we want to be in 2 years, 3 years' time, and keep focusing on that 2 or 3 years' time. Every single one of us who've ever studied for an examination or a qualification will have done this. It's difficult studying, it's hard work, but we know that in 2 or 3 years' time, we will have our qualification, and the qualification will lead us on to better work and a career. Now is the time to focus not on today, not on next week or next month, but how life will be in 2 years' time. From that comes your goals, your lists, and your priorities. There is a very famous saying that says, the positivity of an action defeats the pessimism of the thought. This means that if you find yourself or your colleagues or your family find themselves thinking, oh dear, this is terrible, and you find yourself focusing on the negative, by doing something positive, you cancel out the thought. Just doing some emails, organizing things, working on a plan, actioning something, you will cancel out the negative. Goals, objectives, and priorities and lists have never been more important than today. Many of us will have to be self-directed. We are not necessarily going to have our boss or a manager giving us clear directions as often as we would have had in the past. Short-term goals that motivate you, lists that help you organize, and then the difference between important and urgent. Interestingly, psychologists have found that when we make a list and we tick things off, the act of ticking something off actually creates endorphins in the brain that make us feel positive. It's like, very simply, a list of things to do, a shopping list, things to talk about. And as you go down the list, you feel more in control and more positive. It's a neat trick, and I would definitely recommend it. Now, this is a very famous matrix, made famous actually by President Eisenhower in America many years ago. And then it was popularized in many books. Stephen Covey, of course, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And what it says is that when we work on important priorities, we feel more positive about ourselves. And a priority is something which is important and urgent in the top right-hand box, important and urgent. And that's when we feel most useful. And indeed, we are the most productive. Now, if you were to move on to other priorities, once you've completed those, would you go to things which were important but not urgent, or urgent but not important? Well, the tendency is sometimes to slip into things which are urgent but not that important compared to other things. Maybe some more trivial emails or things which don't really contribute to our objectives or goals. If we work on things which are, as Stephen Covey calls it, box B, important but not urgent, we will achieve more results. The dangerous box to avoid is not urgent or important. We may be doing these things because they're a habit or because they have some enjoyment to them. We need to avoid these. Let me give an example. If a colleague asks you to do a presentation, you may leave preparing the slides or the notes until the last moment because it's not important and urgent. If we only wait to do things when they're important and urgent, we create more stress and maybe have more problems. So always ask yourself, once you've completed the important and urgent, what is now my next task? Before we leave this slide, I'd like to just mention something. Urgency is, of course, time bound. When does something need to be done by? Today, tomorrow, next week? Important, well, this is a judgment call, a decision you have to make. And important is something to do with the value of completing it or the consequence of not achieving it. For example, if you were to write down now, just take a piece of paper and a pen, 6 things that you wanted to achieve this week. I would recommend trying this. 6 things to do this week, emails to send, people to talk to, actions to achieve. And then rate each one on a high to low scale of high importance, low importance. The important questions you could ask is, what's the payoff for achieving this? What do I gain? What would happen if I didn't do it? These questions will lead you to decide what's relatively important or unimportant. It's fair to guess that of the 6 things that you would write down today if you did this activity, 2 of them would be more important than all the others put together. And some of them wouldn't be urgent at all, but that's why you should schedule them. Before I leave this slide, I'll share a thought with you. When it comes to making a list and setting goals and priorities, don't prioritize your schedule, schedule your priorities. So if you have to prepare a report for somebody, put in the diary, put in your calendar, the time you're going to achieve that. Let's say between 1 and 2 o'clock. Then when it pings off, you know that's what you have to work on. So always schedule your priorities as events in your calendar. This means you will be driven forward, not left to wander. We all know about goals. Goals are vitally important. Take a moment to write them down every morning. The goals for the week, the month, the year, for 2, 3, or 10 years. Try and set yourself a 30-day stretch goal. What is a stretch goal? A stretch goal is something that helps you to improve what you do. It's something you perhaps wouldn't try or do unless you set the goal itself. I'll give you an example in a moment. The 4 questions that you set with a stretch goal is, what do I want to achieve? Why is it important? When do I want to achieve it by? The 30 days, by the way, could be shorter, but no longer than 30 days. These are nice, easy goals with a definite sense of achievement. And then how am I going to achieve that goal? What are the action steps, the resources, and the ideas that will help me to achieve it? So the example, let's imagine I decide I need to become better at using my Outlook system to manage my emails. So why is that important? Well, I spend a lot of time on emails, and it will be useful to know how to set up rules and all the automated actions, and maybe archive certain things, and just basically set up my contacts and everything else. It would save me time and make me more effective and reduce a bit of stress. Lots of whys then. When? Well, let's say a month today. How? Well, I need to set aside some time. I need to watch some YouTube videos. I need to look at the Microsoft website and look at some guides. So I'm going to spend 2 hours tomorrow and another 2 hours on Monday, and let's see how that goes. So this is the plan, okay? It's a stretch goal. I wouldn't do it unless I decided to work on it. Now, another thing that sociologists have noticed about human beings, particularly those that work for a company or work in a job, is we become creatures of habit. It is estimated that 80% of our daily routine is habit. If you just think about that for a moment, 80%. So that means that most of what we do during the day is automatic. We don't even think about it. We get a coffee or a tea or a soft drink at a particular time. We get up at a certain time, we go to bed at a certain time, we have our lunch and refreshments and breaks at a certain time. And it's a very kind of easy to live process. In many ways, we don't have to think about things. They become a habit. So this is a good structure, except that sometimes, and this has happened in these challenging times, is the habits have changed. Maybe you're not going to work in the same way. You're not working in an office. You might be working different hours, or nobody notices what time you get out of bed or you go to bed in the evenings. So we need to create our own structure to the day. Here are 3 very simple things that begin to anchor your day if you don't have a structure imposed. Now, if you think about this, when did this start? This probably started at our school days, when we would go to school at a certain time and would have a very clear structure for our lessons and lunch times and going homes, and our parents would make us do our homework. So we've learnt to love this structure. Here are 3 anchors you can put into your day. And the first one is to set and decide a time you want to wake up every morning and get out of bed, regardless of what you're doing. And my suggestion is make that early rather than later. Getting up early at the same time every day is really valuable. The opposite is to go to bed and retire from the day at the same time. And the third one is to have a ritual, have something in the day that gives you a sense of pleasure, perhaps, or release or unwinding. Here's a very simple one, and this is very common, and many of you will do this, is you go for a walk. And if you can go outside for half an hour, some fresh air, that little ritual, maybe at the same time every day, this will help you become more effective. Always try and develop positive habits. And a positive habit is where you don't wait for inspiration or impulse. You make it a habit. This is why most people, most of us, would have brushed our teeth today. We didn't wait until we feel like brushing our teeth. We did it because it's an impulsive habit. And try and make that the same with seeing your family or doing your work or your emails, or maybe some of those tasks you don't like doing, like tidying your desk. Make it a habit and it becomes easier. When you get a good schedule and a good structure and routine in our lives, things are not only more productive, but we actually have more enjoyment during the day. And also encourage your colleagues, your friends, and your family to work this way. It does actually make for more cohesive relationships too. Eating healthily, not because it's necessarily the right thing to do, but our brains do better with the right food. Our energy levels do better. And regardless of what you prefer to eat, leaving 3 or 4 hours between meals can also manage our energy levels. Of course, exercise is something to build into any routine. And it's interesting how the research now has shown that the intensity or duration of exercise doesn't really affect the benefit of the exercise. Just a simple 30 to 45-minute walk is better than, or as good as, I should say, running or some more vigorous form of activity, as they believe is the case now. And then also, maybe slightly more strangely, practice gratitude. Focus on what you can be thankful for, not what you are not thankful for. Look at the positive, not the negative. See a glass as half full, not half empty. So obviously, these are uncertain times for many people. Look at the positive side, and there is always something positive about almost anything. It's just how you look at it in many cases. Finally, even if you're not at school or college or studying for something, a study habit is what we learn. And we are in a world today where knowledge is important, where knowledge is power. So what we're looking at is improving the way we study, research, and learn about things. Finally, resilience. Now, resilience means that you just keep on with persistence when things get difficult. And this is a quality that we may not have needed before. When things are going well, we don't need to be resilient. When everything is easy, we don't need determination. But when things become difficult, then we do need to work things out. Let me give you a very practical example. Some of you will be very familiar and will have used this technology we're using today for many years. Many people will be using it for the first time. They would have had to learn how to use it. They may find it difficult or uncomfortable. However, when you persevere and when you take the time to learn something, they tend to pay off in terms of benefits. Another thing about a good routine is to manage money wisely. Clearly, we can't spend as much with all the shops closed, but even so, it's still worth taking time. It's all a good habit to have. So let's summarize. A routine or a habit means deciding in advance how you will react to changing or challenging situations. If you work with your colleagues, you'll find that they will also be doing the same. A 50-10 principle can work extremely well. This means you work for 50 minutes of an hour and then take 10 minutes, not quite as a break, but by doing any tasks you want. Perhaps taking a break, getting a drink, doing something more trivial, and then going back to the 50 minutes. It's a very good little routine that works well for many people. Here's another homework assignment I'd like you to take away from today. Is describe your ideal perfect work day. I don't mean your perfect leisure day. That would be easy for most of us. But what would make a good work day? How would it flow? What would you do? And how is it different from now? So it may not be possible to change it completely or change it quickly, but you may be able to influence it if you know what it looks like. So routine, structure, and habits are definitely important to focus on, particularly if you've now had a disruption to your life and those habits have changed. For example, maybe your children are not going to school in the way they would have done. That's changed your habit. So you have to adjust to that. Psychologists have found it takes around 21 days to change a habit. Now, I personally believe when you get a little bit older, it takes a little bit longer. So don't be impatient, just take the time, but habits can be changed and reformed. Let's look at one of the next points on this self-management in challenging times. Controlling your attention. Now, this is very much like steering a car. When you come out of a road, do you turn left or right? Depending which choice, you end up in a different place. And it's a bit like that with your attention. If you choose to focus on, let's say, negative things or trivial things or gossip or discussion, negative discussion, then that will take you to a negative place. If you control your attention and look at positive things or uplifting information, then you will end up in a more positive place. Now, this is very simplistic, I have to say, and there's perhaps more to this, but let's just look at some key principles and you'll see what I mean. So this is all, by the way, based on science, not my personal opinion. They have found that if you control your attention, so on a daily basis, you're getting, let's say, positive input. Now, whether this is a news program, reading a book, a biography, something uplifting, praying or religious texts, something which is a positive input. And I don't mean newspapers where you read about negative news or television programs with bad news. This is, of course, is negative thinking. So a positive input, something which is uplifting. They've also done studies where people have listened to positive music for somewhere around an hour a day, not in one go, but maybe you have it on in the background or you listen when you're walking. And they've done the studies where people have not listened to music and where they have. And the people who listen to music for around an hour a day, which is positive and uplifting music, are actually more productive and have a more positive outlook. Now, the interesting thing that the scientists are confused by is, number one, they don't know why music affects us this way. And every culture in the world has music, but it serves no purpose in terms of communication or any kind of productive thing. But it does seem to have an effect on our mood and our focus. Another thought is that we are the representation or the influence of the 6 people we are closest to in the world. So associate with positive, happy people, and you will become one of them. And finally, just avoid the negative. If a friend or family member or a colleague is having a negative conversation, is getting a bit doomsterish and talking about the gloom and the doom, change the subject, move on. Turn off negative radio, television, podcasts, and websites. Don't dwell on the negative, focus on the positive. It affects your mood. It affects your outlook, which ultimately affects your attitude, which affects your activity, which affects your ability. Everything is kind of connected like a series of dominoes. A focused attention creates opportunity and it creates interest. Here's a book I bought many years ago. You can't afford the luxury of a negative thought. And it says that a negative thought can actually turn yourself away from you. So remember the old principle of what we become, what we think about. Start your day, finish your day. If you find yourself becoming negative, try these 3 questions. Piece of paper and a pen. Write down one thing that you're grateful for. Say thank you to someone who's done something nice for you or whose time and efforts you appreciate. And then think of one good thing that's happened to you recently. Now, everybody can answer these 3 questions. It may take you a little bit longer to think about, and that just shows you haven't got the habit or the practice of being positive. Okay. Many years ago, I was working with a manager and he insisted that before I leave the office, I say thank you to 3 people for 3 different things. And sometimes I'd be walking across the car park and I'd forgotten to do it and I had to go back in and say thank you to 3 people for 3 different things that I appreciated their efforts in. And then what was interesting, as I began to do this activity, I realized there were so many people doing so many good things in my team. Thank you for staying late to do that. Thank you for doing that without asking. Thank you for your help in this problem solving. Thank you for being there when I needed you to help with this meeting. All those little things. Thank you for getting me a drink. It's just taking the time to focus on those positive things, which we don't see because we're not looking. Now, your boss is going to go, Graham, why are you telling these people to have more leisure time? Because it helps you be more productive. If you work too hard, you can get burnout. This is proven over and over again. This is not me inventing this. If we are working in a different pattern as we are now, what we need to do is to create a better routine and a new pattern of working. Once again, it's been proven scientifically that if you take an hour a day doing something of pleasure. And it's interesting how they define this, something which is pointless but with a purpose. What does this mean? Well, pointless without with a purpose. It doesn't really add anything to your day or your career or your job responsibilities, but it is enjoyable. It keeps your brain working and it has some kind of purpose. For example, a crossword puzzle or a Sudoku. Now, in itself, it's quite interesting and it's quite challenging, but when you've finished it, you throw it away. So there's a good example. Sport is often one of these. You play a game of tennis. Well, it's fun and it's enjoyable. It's good exercise, but it doesn't contribute in terms of it doesn't earn you money. Playing a piano, learning a language, all of these things fit to this one. So what we need to do is to create this release and this balance from a focus on work life. Here are some suggestions. Many of you will do this. Encourage your colleagues to do the same and keep focused. The first one is time to read. Now, newspapers, of course, are a very common thing for most of us. Increasingly now, we read them online as apps or websites, news websites, but also reading non-fiction books, books to do with our business or industry, or something we're interested in. You might be interested in a particular type of history, or a hobby like such as cooking or wildlife. If it interests you, take time to read and learn about it. You'll be more engaged and more complete as a person. You will be more productive in your work. I tried this recently. I sat down for half an hour a day and read a book. Even when I was really busy and I had so much to do, I stopped, switched off mentally, focused on something else, and went back and was able to work longer and more accurately because of that. Not straight away, but after a few days of doing that, that actually works. You see, often what I will do is I will learn these ideas, and then I will practice them on myself and the people I work with, and they do tend to work. Now, do remember, as we're going through this, please feel free to send me a chat question, anything at all you'd like to ask, and I will make some time towards the end of the session to pick up a few of these questions. Now, time with people is another important leisure activity. And this is something we do already, and we have been prevented from doing because of the coronavirus and the restrictions on many countries. Now, clearly, we spend time with our family because we're sharing a house with them. But I'm talking here about socializing. And many of the reasons why we enjoy going to work is to socialize, to meet and mix and mingle with our colleagues and co-workers who become friends to us. We spend many hours a week with them. So what's important now is to work at scheduling time to be with them even when we're not. So that's things like Zoom or Click meetings or Teams meetings. It's maybe taking time to call them on the phone or write longer, perhaps more friendly emails, communicate via WhatsApp. All of these techniques will create more interaction with people. In his book Influence, Robert Cialdini says the key to relationships is shorter, more frequent meetings, not necessarily longer and less frequent meetings. So it's very important we don't lose that habit of connecting with people and interacting socially, even just for a friendship's sake. Time to relax is another one. Now, this is where I don't necessarily mean watching television or web streaming or anything else. This is where we do something to relax. Maybe do nothing, or maybe some of the things we've already mentioned, such as reading or discussion with people. But that ability to switch off is often where we can recharge our batteries. What's interesting is that scientists now believe this is a chemical release. There's a stress chemical, a stress hormone they call it, called cortisol. And cortisol can build up in our bloodstream from stressful situations or from negative thinking. One of the ways of getting rid of the cortisol is exercise. Another way is relaxation. Sleep, of course, is the extreme form of relaxation. So this is very important. I have 2 more to go. As well as the time it takes to look after ourselves, to take time to find leisure time, we also need to find time in our day or week for self-care. Now, this of course is important for lots of reasons, and it becomes more important when we have the time of coronavirus. Now, the coronavirus, we've all learned a great deal about this over the last 3 months, and we are now much more careful with such things as hygiene, hand washing, and of course social distancing. As we begin to go back to work, as many companies and countries now are, there is a question about, is it safe? I see this in the newspaper and talking to people. Is it safe to go back to work? If you work in a contact center or a busy factory or a warehouse or an office or a shop where you're coming into contact with members of the public, or you're having to walk on the street or travel on a bus or a train, this is a real question. Is it safe? Well, the coronavirus can be defeated with 3 very simple principles. It's a water-based virus, which means it's carried in water droplets. So if you stand a certain distance away from people, the water droplets cannot go between you. The scientists believe the minimum is 1 meter, 2 meters to be really safe. So by standing apart from each other, and outdoors is the safest of all, and if you have to be indoors, sit more distance between you, alternate desks, alternate chairs, and make sure you have proper ventilation, either good quality air conditioning or windows open. Wearing a mask or encouraging or insisting others wear a mask can also help. A mask won't really affect you being able to not catch the disease, but it will stop the droplets being transmitted from your breath. So it will be safer for everybody else. And it's a mark of respect wearing a mask. If everybody on a train or a bus or a plane is wearing a mask, it will reduce dramatically the water droplets in the air and therefore the chance of the virus spreading. Washing your hands frequently during the day, wiping down your desk, computer, phone, and any other tools with disinfectant wipes or disinfectant spray at the beginning and the end of every shift is essential. So these 3 principles will help you to become safe and others around you. Now, let's look at some more advanced points of self-care. Anything you do to look after yourself could be seen as self-care. Making time for yourself. Obviously, a good hygiene routine in terms of washing and cleanliness. Eating healthy food. Going outside. Just taking things easy. Don't be too hard on yourself when things don't go as well as you hoped. Or if you don't sometimes meet the standards you have for yourself. You're not always as kind or as friendly as you want to be. Sometimes your mood kicks in, or other people have moody moments. Forgive them. There is no point in making a scene of something when it's past. Richard Carlson, many years ago, wrote a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And in the book, he talks about the fact we tend to worry about little things like we didn't get something from the shop that we wanted to go, or we broke a cup, or somebody didn't do something they said they were going to do. or somebody keeps putting the towel on the floor, not the towel rail. And these are the things that begin to get us stressed and worried. Now, there's enough big things in the world to worry about, so let's not sweat the small stuff. And Richard Carlson in the book says basically 99% of it, the things we worry about, the things we concern ourselves with, are small stuff. And I think one of the things that many of us have now realized as a result of the last few months is the most important thing any of us have is our health and our well-being. So make sure that self-care is something now you encourage your friends and families and colleagues and co-workers to do. So as we go back to our normal, or kind of what we call here in the UK, new normal lives, take time for breaks, take time to relax. Make sure you do practice really good hygiene, and other people too. It's not, as they say, a nice to have, it's now a must have. Plenty of rest. Now, as you get older, of course, you do need slightly less sleep. This is why, and when you're younger, they say you need more sleep. This would explain why teenagers never seem to get out of bed on time. But certainly rest is now proven to be regeneration in its new form. We are going to have times of busyness and mental activity to make sure we recharge the batteries when we can. Keeping away from stressful situations. Here are 3 very simple examples. Deadlines. Make sure that when you promise a deadline to somebody, when you're going to do something, give yourself enough time to achieve it. Under promise and over deliver. Don't say I'll do that for you today when maybe I'll do that for you by tomorrow morning would be better. The stress of a deadline can build and build and build, given how many things we often do. The second is get early for things. I was one of these people that used to get to the airport or get to the train station with seconds to spare and have to run through the forecourt, pushing everyone out of the way because I only had a few minutes to get to the gate or get on my train. And I would get there panting and stressed with my heart pounding. Why would I do that to myself? So now don't do it. Get there in plenty of time, buy a magazine, drink a drink, and relax. And finally, stop arguing with people. Be nice, be kind. Accept that people have different opinions and people are allowed to be wrong. Stop getting stressed because people have a different view of the world to you. Just shrug your shoulders and say, that's what they think. Don't look for arguments, and if they find you, walk away. Stress is a chemical release, and it doesn't do us any good. The cortisol I mentioned before triggers a flight or fight response. It's from our physiological days when we used to live in caves and we didn't know if a noise was a friendly raccoon or an evil tiger. And we would prepare ourselves physiologically to run or fight. And it's exactly the same now. If somebody cuts us up in traffic or a rude person, it triggers the same chemical release. Sometimes after one of these events, you can physically be shaking. This is the adrenaline and the oxygen in your bloodstream. So just keep well away from all those situations, and you will find you'll be able to get through the day much easier than before. Here's an exercise I'd like to do in a few minutes when this session finishes. List 3 things that you can do on a daily basis that will improve the quality of each day or be good for you. 3 things. And it doesn't matter how small those things are. Here's one example a colleague of mine did after we did this session. And he went away and he emailed me and he said, Graham, I can't think of 3 things. And I said, well, just think of one thing. One thing every day that if you can do, and it's going to be a positive contribution to the quality of your day. And he emailed me back a few days later and said, I found it. He said, it's tidying my desk. He said, every day now I make a ritual. of tidying my desk, getting everything lined up, my pens, my computer. I wipe things down, I disinfect things. And then when I start my day in the morning, I go down into my spare room and everything is neat and tidy. There's a picture of my children and it's fabulous. It's as simple as that. Having a nice routine for a breakfast, having something that you do which just you look forward to in a day. 3 things every day. Often we can combine the things we've already mentioned. A nice meal with our friends and family, a walk in the country, a walk down the street, a phone call with our friends. All of these things are empowering and positive. They're often things, by the way, we have to make time for, because if we don't, they tend not to happen. The last one, and in some ways the easiest of all, is to manage your environment. What do I mean by that? Your work area. Now, if you're working from home and your home is quite small, as many people find, particularly if you're living in a big city, you may find that your work area is a small corner of a desk with your partner or children sitting at the other end of the desk. But even so, manage that area as if it was important. If you have a nice big area with a big desk, then the same thing is true. But let me explain what I really mean about managing the environment. Obviously, you want to make it nice and you may want to make it positive. But what I'm thinking of here is avoiding distraction. If we're working from home or we're working independently without people around us, we can sometimes get distracted. So that environment, that area, we need to banish distractions from. Let me show you some very simple examples of what I mean. Okay, let's put the slide up here. Now, everyday distractions, such as people coming in and out of your work area or your room, going down to the kitchen, doing household chores, being distracted doing personal things like personal emails or bills or whatever it is try and create a space on the desk which is your work area. If you have a room you're working with a door on it, close the door and put a sign on saying do not disturb. But open the door regularly so people can disturb you and talk to you. Remember the 50-10 rule. 50 minutes of no interruptions, 10 minutes of interruptions. It works fine. Have like a little zone, a little area. Now, many people do this with things like having a prayer area or a meditation area. These sort of things, which are sort of little sacred areas where they go and sit. Maybe a chair they sit in to read the paper or read a book or watch television. And it's their little sacred area. And these are really important little rituals we like as human beings. So make sure you take the time to get that right. And then you can then structure your day even more. Regular breaks. They now believe every 90 minutes we should stand up, we should stretch, and we should focus our eyes on a further distance than just on our screen. Do not miss meals. Take time to go outside, even just a few minutes. And most of us will have experienced this, by the way, on a long drive in a car. After about an hour and a half or 2 hours, you might want to pull over. You get out the car. You spend a few minutes just stretching and standing up. You get back in the car feeling much more refreshed. We need to do this in our work day, even when we're not driven by meetings or colleagues interrupting us. The environment we work in can also make a big difference on our positivity and our efficiency. A recent study highlighted that many people would take 30 to 40 minutes a day looking for things. So make a habit of keeping things clean, tidy, and organized. And it doesn't have to be very high tech. Even as you can see in the picture here, a notice board so the things you're working on are visible. Having a notepad and a pen handy. So when an email or a message comes through and you think, I need to do that, you write it down so you don't forget. There are also online tools like Trello and other tools as well where you can schedule them, remind them. My email system now has this great ability to snooze items and have them pop up at a certain time, which is great. And it allows me to keep organized. One of the keys to keeping organized is to throw away things you don't need or use. Now, this is hard for some people. I struggle with this particularly. Other people, it's easy. But the thing to remember is that the less things you have, the easier things are to find, and the less things you have to concern yourself with in terms of thinking. So have a clear desk, clear bookshelves, focus, and tidy. The Japanese are good at this. The Chinese that have this idea of feng shui, so we can learn from these lessons. Okay. Now, I've covered a great deal of information today. And one of the reasons I've done this, I wanted to make today's session as good value and as informative as I possibly could. I really appreciate the time you've taken today to listen to these ideas, and we will send you a list of the slides to the list of registered emails. But let me just summarize. In a challenging time, we need leadership. We need leaders who can encourage us and motivate us and inspire us to overcome the troubles we face and come through this. And we will come through this. We're already making that progress. We're already seeing things come back to a much higher level of positivity than they were just a few weeks ago. But what we really need right now is self-leadership. So create that long-term vision of how you will be, your life, where you'll be living, how things will be in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time. Yes, children will have missed several months of their education. We may have missed our colleagues. We may be behind in our career, but things will catch up. Develop a positive routine and habit structure. Get up at the same time, go to bed at the same time, and have one set piece routine in the middle of your day. Make sure you make time for the positive leisure activities, whether that's a sport, doing a jigsaw puzzle, or just something you enjoy which has no value whatsoever, particularly if it involves thinking and uses parts of your brain. I guess computer games fit into that, but if you do use a computer game as part of positive leisure time, keep the limit low because those games are very addictive. Make sure also you set goals, priorities, and lists. Lists are critical to self-management and leadership. Control your attention. Look at things which empower you, inspire you, and motivate you, and avoid the negative. If you find yourself getting worried about the future or about the coronavirus pandemic or something else like the economy, go cold turkey on the news. Do not listen to any news, newspapers, or websites for 24 hours. It's amazing how positive that can be. And then finally, look after yourself. Make sure you follow the advice around the coronavirus in terms of distancing, masks, and washing and wiping. They become simple habits. It is safe to go back to work if we follow these simple rules, and then look after your own health. As most of us have learned over the last few months, this is the most important thing any of us have as a gift, is our health. And finally, whether you live in a palace or a small pad, make sure that it's your area and it's conducive to getting work done. It's organized and tidy. So I hope you've enjoyed this session. I wish you lots of luck and good fortune in the future, and hopefully welcome you to one of our other sessions and other training courses in the next few weeks and months. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and lots of luck in the future. Thank you.